As we've mentioned, we're less than 2 days away from all those hunters, some with bows, most with guns, heading into the woods for the opening of the gun deer season. But how many deer will there actually be? Well, that question is at the heart of a growing controversy around the state. And Fox 11 on special assignment this evening takes a look at how the state tries to get an accurate count and why some say that technique needs change. Here's Robert Hornacek.
Perhaps no issue in Wisconsin brings out as much passion as deer hunting. It's $1 billion a year industry, and in the past few years, it's been filled with controversy.
44 deer per square mile, what a joy.
Hunters have expressed their frustration with the Department of Natural Resources over its management of the herd. The frustration culminated last month when the legislature passed a bill banning the controversial Earn-a-Buck program, where hunters in select areas had to kill an antlerless deer before they could shoot a buck. Andy Puntzloff is one of those frustrated hunters. He helped lead the effort to get rid of Earn-a-Buck.
Enough's enough. We need to take a look at the management scheme for this area. Obviously, it's been skewed and it's been over-harvested because it's been mandated that we over-harvest.
Puntzloff, who's with the United Sportsmen of Wisconsin, says the DNR is too focused on its own data.
The hunters and farmers and landowners have been telling the DNR for several years that the numbers have gone down to almost nothing in some areas. And the DNR said, no, our formula says that there still is plenty of deer.
The DNR has traditionally released a statewide estimate of the deer herd each fall. Back in 2001, for example, there were an estimated 1.5 million deer in the woods and more than 688,000 hunters. That's nearly 3 deer for every hunter. According to the DNR, the statewide estimate peaked in 2007 with somewhere between 1.6 and 1.8 million deer, with about 641,000 hunters. That sounds like a lot of deer, and that may be part of the problem. In recent years, the DNR has chosen not to release a statewide estimate. Regional wildlife biologist Jeff Pritzel says the statewide estimate gave hunters unrealistic expectations.
Whether it's up or down, it's for the most part going to be over 1 million animals. And that sounds like a heck of a lot of deer, and that portrays an image of, wow, there must be a lot of deer out there. But again, people's individual experiences are going to vary all across the board. And so we came to realize that looking at it statewide can portray kind of a false expectation of what's going to be out there.
While the statewide estimate is no longer put together, the DNR does still spend a lot of time trying to figure out how many deer are in the woods.
The way we estimate the deer population is we take the number of deer that the hunters will harvest this fall, and that number will tell us or give us a good estimate of how many deer must have been alive back in September to have allowed this harvest to have happened.
The method used by the DNR is called sex, age, kill. Here's how it works. After the season, the DNR takes the information provided by hunters, including the sex of the animals killed and for some deer their age. The agency then calculates what's called the buck harvest rate and the adult sex ratio. The DNR also calculates the doe to fawn ratio in the fall by using data collected by staff and volunteer observations. All of that information is combined, and the DNR is then able to estimate how many deer there were before that hunting season started. The DNR stresses that it's only an estimate. Plus, since the formula relies so heavily on the number of deer killed, the numbers can be affected by things like bad weather, especially on opening weekend.
Once or twice a decade, it might throw us a curve to where it causes our estimate to be off by a percentage that's higher than normal. And in those years are when we catch it because, you know, the harvest doesn't portray what we thought it was going to. But the beauty of the system is that every year we get an independent new check based on the registration. And so if we are off, we'll usually catch it the very next year.
Try telling that to hunters.
I think their formulas need adjustment now.
Steve Gavert is with the Wisconsin Deer Hunters Association. He doesn't question the science behind the DNR estimates. He questions the timing of it.
That worked real fine through the 60s, 70s, and 80s when the deer were equally distributed on the landscape and it was basically a random encounter between the hunters and the deer.
Now with the rise in baiting, he says deer are no longer equally distributed.
It really has become to the point where the facts don't matter.
Freelance writer Patrick Durkin says the issue is not a problem of numbers, it's a problem of perception.
There's no state that compiles more deer data than we do and then share it publicly. And but the more information you provide people, the more they question various aspects of it. Then a lot of times, I have to say, a lot of them really don't understand what they're looking at. They're still looking at in terms of their 40, their 20, whatever it might be. The DNR is typically looking at it from a larger regional basis.
Things have gotten so tense that the governor has decided to bring in an outsider. James Kroll is a wildlife biologist from Texas.
It's time for a change. It's time for a new way to look at deer management.
Last month, Kroll became Wisconsin's deer czar. He's teamed up with 2 other deer experts to review what the DNR does and find ways to make it better. His priority, he says, is to get the public more involved.
Over the last 2 decades across the nation, agencies have kind of come to a point where they've excluded public. And we want to reconnect the people with the process, because that's what we're here for, is for the people.
So what does all this mean for the average deer hunter in Wisconsin? Well, that's not so clear. There are no easy answers and certainly no silver bullet when it comes to managing the deer herd. The Deer Czar will have a final report with recommendations next summer. And if you'd like to test your knowledge of deer hunting in Wisconsin, go to our website, fox11online.com, for an interactive quiz. You'll find it by clicking on the On Special Assignment tab on the home page. There you can also find more of my interview with the new Deer Czar. For Fox 11 on Special Assignment, I'm Robert Hornacek.